Ambassador ZYX-427 had spent 300 cycles preparing for this moment. The Galactic Council's most experienced diplomat stood at the airlock of their crystalline ship, tentacles smoothing down the iridescent ceremonial robes one final time. Their species prided themselves on being unflappable, approaching every situation with careful analysis and measured responses. Yet, nothing in their extensive preparation could have readied them for the reality of Earth. The first shock came during the landing approach. Instead of being directed to a remote, secure facility as protocol suggested, their ship was cleared to land at what the humans called JFK International Airport, right in the middle of their bustling civilization. Hundreds of other aircraft, carrying thousands of humans, continued their normal operations around them. The humans hadn't even closed their airspace for this historic moment. "Welcome to Earth, Ambassador," greeted Director Thomas Rivera of the United Nations First Contact Division. "I trust your journey was comfortable?" The humans stood there, surrounded by a small delegation, wearing what ZYX's research indicated was formal attire, suit. No protective gear, no security barriers, not even basic radiation shielding. Most interesting, ZYX managed to respond through their translator. Their sensory tendrils were already overwhelmed by the cacophony of data. The air itself was thick with electromagnetic signals, billions of humans simultaneously broadcasting data, entertainment, and communications with seemingly no concern for the chaos it created. The drive from the airport to the UN headquarters provided no respite for ZYX's mounting confusion. Their protective transport bubble moved through streets teeming with humans going about their daily lives. Some stopped to stare and take pictures with their primitive devices, while others barely glanced up from their personal electronics. "Is this not an excessive risk?" ZYX inquired, watching a group of young humans performing acrobatics on wheeled boards near their vehicle. "Allowing such proximity to an unknown alien species?" Director Rivera laughed, a sound that ZYX's species used only in moments of extreme distress. "Ambassador, if we locked down the city for every potential risk, New Yorkers would never get anything done. Besides, transparency builds trust, doesn't it?" The concept of building trust through vulnerability went against everything in ZYX's diplomatic training. Yet, here was humanity, treating first contact with an alien civilization as if it were merely another Tuesday. The true magnitude of Earth's paradoxes became apparent during the initial briefing at the UN. Humanity had mastered nuclear fusion but still burned fossil fuels in some regions. They had developed nanomedicine but continued to perform invasive surgeries. Their cities reached into the clouds, yet millions chose to live in what they called rural areas, deliberately disconnecting from the technological grid. "And this is our current space exploration program," explained Dr. Rajesh Patel, Chief of Earth Space Development Initiative. "We're preparing for the first crewed mission to Mars next year." "Your vessels lack quantum shielding," ZYX observed, their horror mounting as they studied the spacecraft designs. "The radiation exposure." "We've developed adequate shielding methods," Dr. Patel responded with what ZYX was beginning to recognize as human pride. "Yes, there are risks, but pushing boundaries is what we do." As the day progressed, ZYX made careful notes in their neural archive. Humans appeared to operate on principles that defied conventional logic. They acknowledged dangers yet proceeded anyway. They developed solutions to problems that hadn't yet occurred. They deliberately sought out challenges when easier paths were available. That evening, in the secure quarters provided by the UN, ZYX began their first report to the Galactic Council. Their tentacles trembled slightly as they composed the message. "Respected Council members. Initial contact with humanity has raised significant concerns. Their civilization appears to be operating in a state of controlled chaos that our traditional metrics failed to detect. They have achieved technological advancement not through careful, methodical progression, but through what can only be described as reckless experimentation and embrace of risk. Most disturbing is their apparent comfort with uncertainty. Unlike any species we have previously encountered, humans seem to thrive on it. They make decisions without complete data, take actions without guaranteed outcomes, and appear to genuinely enjoy the process. I must advise that our standard diplomatic protocols may be insufficient for this species. Their unpredictability makes them either the most dangerous or most valuable potential allies we have ever encountered. Perhaps, most alarmingly, they could be both. Further observation is required before final recommendations can be made. However, one thing is certain, we have greatly underestimated the complexity of this species. With grave concern. Ambassador ZYX 427-inch. As ZYX prepared to transmit the report, a loud explosion echoed from outside. Their emergency protocols activated instantly, only to be interrupted by a human aide calmly explaining the concept of fireworks, explosions created purely for entertainment. The ambassador added a postscript to their report: they detonate recreational explosives in their atmosphere for aesthetic purposes. Request immediate guidance. Ambassador ZYX 427's second day on Earth began with what the humans called a special demonstration at their military training facility. The morning sun cast long shadows across the grounds of West Point Academy as their transport bubble descended onto the parade field. Today we'll show you how we prepare our defenders, announced General Rebecca Martinez, a human female whose stance radiated authority. ZYX's research had indicated that humans maintained military forces, but nothing had prepared them for what they were about to witness. The first demonstration was something called hand-to-hand combat training. ZYX watched in horror as pairs of humans deliberately attacked each other with precise movements. Their tentacles curled in distress as bodies were thrown, joints were locked, and impacts were exchanged. Are these humans being punished? ZYX asked through their translator. General Martinez smiled, another of those puzzling human expressions. Not at all. This is how we train our soldiers to defend themselves without weapons. The skills they learn here could save their lives in the field. But they are harming each other, ZYX protested. Not really, the general explained. They're learning control, discipline, and how to protect themselves and others. Watch how each interaction ends with respect, a bow or a handshake. The next demonstration proved even more bewildering. A group of humans jumped from a perfectly functional aircraft, plummeting toward the ground at terminal velocity. ZYX's emergency protocols nearly overloaded their neural system before they realized this was intentional, something called airborne training. These soldiers learned to overcome their natural fear of heights, Lieutenant James Wilson explained proudly. It builds confidence and teaches them to trust their equipment and training. The concept of deliberately inducing fear as a teaching method was so alien to ZYX that they had to create a new category in their neural archive to process it. But the true shock came during the afternoon session. After lunch, another overwhelming experience involving something called barbecue, they were taken to observe what humans called sports training. This can't be correct, ZYX transmitted urgently to their ship's AI as they watched humans on a field deliberately colliding with each other over possession of an oval ball. These are civilians engaging in recreational combat. The AI's response was equally confused. Analysis indicates this behavior is called football practice. It appears to be a popular form of entertainment. Director Rivera, noting ZYX's distress, attempted to explain, sports help us channel competitive instincts in a controlled environment. They teach teamwork, strategy, and resilience. Plus, they're fun to watch. The concept of fun had been giving ZYX particular trouble. Their species experienced satisfaction through successful problem-solving and harmony achievement. But humans seemed to derive pleasure from activities that created problems intentionally. The day continued with demonstrations of various sports: basketball, where humans launched themselves into the air fighting over a spherical object; hockey, where they propelled themselves at high speeds on frozen water while wielding clubs; and something called mixed martial arts, that appeared to be ritualized combat for public entertainment. That evening, ZYX composed their second report to the Galactic Council. Esteemed Council members, today's observations have revealed disturbing patterns in human behavior. They systematically expose their young to controlled violence and deliberate physical risk as part of their development process. More alarming still, they have transformed combat training into entertainment. Their military preparation involves psychological conditioning that would be considered traumatic in our society. Yet, the humans emerge from these experiences stronger and more capable. They deliberately seek out discomfort and challenge as a means of improvement. Most concerning is the widespread nature of these practices. What we initially assumed to be specialized military training appears to be deeply embedded in their civilian culture through these sports. Even their young participate in modified versions of these combat simulations. The implications are significant. Every human, regardless of their role in society, is conditioned from an early age to face physical challenges and embrace competitive conflict. Their entire civilization is, in essence, a warrior culture disguised as a peaceful one. However, I must note something unexpected. Despite the seemingly violent nature of these activities, they appear to foster strong social bonds. Participants in these sports often form deep friendships with their opponents. Military units display levels of loyalty and trust that exceed our highest diplomatic relationships. Perhaps most puzzling is their insistence that these activities are primarily recreational. They have transformed the development of combat skills into a form of play. The line between preparation for conflict and entertainment appears to be deliberately blurred. Recommendation: previous assessments of human military capacity may need significant revision. Their potential for mobilization exceeds our initial estimates, as their civilian population maintains a baseline level of combat readiness through these recreational activities. With growing concern. Ambassador ZYX for 27-inch. As ZYX prepared for sleep that night, their quarters erupted with the sound of thousands of humans cheering. A quick check revealed the source: a nearby stadium was hosting something called a championship game. The ambassador added another note to their report: they gather in massive numbers to watch recreational combat. The emotional investment in these events appears to rival their response to actual warfare. Their final thought before entering sleep cycle was a disturbing one: perhaps humans hadn't survived their violent past by overcoming it, but by finding new ways to channel it. The implications of this realization would require careful consideration. Ambassador ZYX 427's third day on Earth was designated for cultural exchange, a term that proved to be a severe understatement. The morning began in what humans called a concert hall, where the New York Philharmonic had arranged a special performance. ZYX's species appreciated harmonious sound patterns, but nothing had prepared them for the assault of a full orchestra. The musicians took their places, lifted their instruments, and at the conductor's signal, launched into Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. The ambassador's sensory tendrils nearly overloaded from the waves of sound. The humans were deliberately creating controlled chaos with their instruments, building layers of complexity that somehow formed a coherent whole. More shocking was the emotional response this generated in the human audience. Some were crying, others sitting with eyes closed in apparent ecstasy. The composer wrote this while completely deaf, whispered Director Rivera during a quiet passage. ZYX's translator must have malfunctioned. Clarification needed. How can one create sound patterns without the ability to perceive them? Beethoven could hear the music in his mind, Rivera explained. He wrote what he imagined. The concept of creating something that one couldn't personally experience was so alien that ZYX had to allocate additional neural processing power to analyze it. The next stop proved even more challenging: a culinary institute where Earth's top chefs had prepared a tasting menu of global cuisines. In ZYX's civilization, nutrition was a matter of efficient fuel delivery. Humans, it seemed, had transformed it into an art form. This dish combines sweet, sour, spicy, and umami flavors, explained Chef Fatima Hassan, presenting something called fusion cuisine. The contrast creates a unique experience. ZYX watched in fascination as humans deliberately consumed substances that caused physical reactions, their faces flushed from spices, tears forming from wasabi, gasps of pleasure from chocolate. They seemed to revel in overwhelming their own sensory systems. The afternoon brought them to a virtual reality entertainment center, where humans willingly strapped devices to their faces to experience simulated realities. ZYX observed as participants screamed in delighted terror on virtual roller coasters, fought digital monsters, and explored imaginary worlds. "Would you like to try it?" offered the facility's director, holding out a headset. "Your species voluntarily experiences artificial fear?" ZYX asked, their tentacles wavering in confusion. "Sometimes the fun is in feeling scared when you know you're actually safe," the director replied with a grin. The day's final stop was a film studio, where ZYX witnessed the creation of what humans called entertainment. The amount of resources devoted to crafting artificial experiences was staggering. Hundreds of humans worked to create elaborate illusions, build fictional worlds, and tell stories that never happened. But why expend such effort on something that isn't real? ZYX asked as they watched a green screen scene being filmed. "Stories help us understand ourselves better," explained the studio executive, Raj Patel. "They let us explore possibilities, face our fears, and dream about what could be." That evening, ZYX compiled their third report to the Galactic Council. Distinguished Council members. Today's observations have revealed an aspect of human civilization that defies conventional analysis. They have developed entire industries dedicated to the deliberate manipulation of sensory and emotional experiences. Their arts, what they call culture, appear to serve no practical purpose, yet they dedicate enormous resources to their creation and preservation. They intentionally expose themselves to stimuli that provoke strong emotional and physical responses, seeking out experiences that our species would consider deeply uncomfortable or even traumatic. Most puzzling is their relationship with artificial experiences. They create elaborate simulations not for training or education, but purely for entertainment. They willingly suspend their awareness of reality to immerse themselves in fictional narratives. The implications are troubling. A species that can so easily blur the line between reality and fiction, that actively seeks out emotional and sensory extremes, represents an unprecedented diplomatic challenge. Their ability to imagine and create what does not exist makes their future actions difficult to predict. However, this characteristic may also explain their rapid technological advancement. A species that constantly imagines alternative realities may be uniquely equipped to envision and then create new possibilities. Of particular concern is their concept of stories. They use fictional narratives not just for entertainment, but as a tool for understanding themselves and their world. This suggests a level of psychological complexity we may have severely underestimated. Recommendation: immediate revision of our cultural exchange protocols. Our current methods of diplomatic interaction may be insufficient for a species that places such high value on emotional and sensory experiences. With deepening perplexity. Ambassador ZYX for 27-inch. As ZYX prepared for their sleep cycle, they found themselves experiencing an unfamiliar sensation. For the first time in their diplomatic career, they were genuinely curious about what the next day would bring. The realization was disturbing. Had mere exposure to humans already begun to affect their thought patterns? They added a final note to their report: exercise caution. Human tendencies toward sensation-seeking may be contagious. Ambassador ZYX 427's fourth day on Earth deviated drastically from the planned schedule. The morning began with urgent alerts flooding every human communication device. A massive solar flare was headed toward Earth, threatening to disable satellites and power grids across the globe. In ZYX's civilization, such a crisis would trigger immediate evacuation to underground shelters. Instead, they watched in amazement as humans sprang into action with what appeared to be practiced chaos. "Ambassador, we need to relocate to the Emergency Operations Center," Director Rivera announced calmly. "You'll have a unique opportunity to observe our crisis response protocols." The Operations Center was a hive of coordinated activity. Screens displayed real-time data from around the globe, while humans rapidly communicated across multiple channels. Instead of panic, ZYX observed something unprecedented: excitement. "Power companies are implementing surge protection protocols," reported Emergency Director Karen Wong. "Space agencies are repositioning satellites. We have 90 minutes until impact." "What about the ISS crew?" someone asked, referring to the humans who voluntarily lived in a space station. "They're moving to the shielded section," Wong replied. "But they're requesting permission to maintain orbital position to gather data on the flare." ZYX's tentacles writhed in disbelief. "They want to stay in orbit during a solar event? Best chance we've had to study a flare of this magnitude up close," explained Dr. Nikolai Volkov, a space weather scientist. "The data could help us better predict and prepare for future events." The ambassador watched as humans around the world chose to face the danger rather than retreat from it. Power plant workers remained at their posts to manage grid loads. Engineers rushed to critical infrastructure sites. Amateur radio operators set up emergency communication networks. The most surprising response came from the civilian population. Instead of chaos or panic, communities organized themselves with remarkable efficiency. People shared resources, set up monitoring stations, and prepared for potential power outages with an almost festive atmosphere. "Your species seems enthusiastic about this crisis," ZYX observed. Director Rivera smiled. "Humans have a knack for pulling together when things get tough. Besides, it's not every day you get to see a solar flare this big." The impact, when it came, was both severe and revealing. Parts of the power grid failed despite preparations. Transportation systems were disrupted. Satellite communications became erratic. But instead of descending into disorder, humans adapted with remarkable speed. ZYX watched as neighborhoods organized impromptu blackout parties. Children played games by candlelight while adults shared food from thawing freezers. Universities turned the event into an impromptu learning opportunity, setting up telescopes with solar filters for public viewing. Most impressive was the speed of recovery. Human engineers worked in rapid shifts to restore power. Scientists collaborated across borders to share data. Within hours, innovative solutions emerged from unlikely sources. A teenager in Mumbai developed a quick fix for some affected mobile devices, while a retired engineer in Brazil proposed a novel method for stabilizing part of the power grid. That evening, by the light of emergency generators, ZYX composed their fourth report to the Galactic Council. Esteemed Council members, today's events have forced a complete re-evaluation of human crisis response capabilities. Their approach to danger defies our understanding of rational behavior, yet demonstrates remarkable effectiveness. Humans appear to enter an enhanced state of functionality during crises. Rather than seeking safety, they actively engage with threats. They not only adapt to dangerous situations but seem to derive satisfaction from overcoming them. Most disturbing is their tendency to view disasters as opportunities. During today's solar event, they continued gathering scientific data despite clear risks. Civilians treated power outages as occasions for social bonding. Their scientists showed more excitement about research possibilities than concern for personal safety. Their crisis response system appears chaotic but achieves results through what they call distributed problem solving. Instead of following rigid protocols, they encourage innovative solutions from all segments of their population. The effectiveness of this approach, while difficult to quantify, cannot be denied. Critical observation: humans become more cooperative during crises, not less. Their social bonds appear to strengthen under pressure. This trait makes them extraordinarily resilient as a species. Warning: previous assessments of human technological capabilities may be overly conservative. Their ability to improvise and adapt under pressure suggests they could advance much faster than predicted, especially when faced with challenges. Recommendation: immediate revision of crisis response protocols for any future interactions with Earth. Our standard diplomatic procedures are inadequate for a species that treats disasters as opportunities for innovation. With growing admiration and concern. Ambassador ZYX 427-inch. As emergency crews continued their work through the night, ZYX added a personal note to their report: perhaps what we perceive as recklessness in humans is actually a deeper form of wisdom, an understanding that growth requires risk, and that comfort with chaos can be a strength, not a weakness. The implications of this insight would require careful consideration. For the first time, ZYX began to wonder if the Galactic Council's careful, measured approach to existence might not be the only path to civilization after all. On their final day on Earth, Ambassador ZYX 427 stood before the United Nations General Assembly. Their tentacles were perfectly still, not from their usual diplomatic composure, but from the weight of the realization they had reached during their stay on Earth. The chamber was packed with representatives from every human nation, all waiting to hear the Galactic Council's preliminary assessment of their species. Behind them, screens showed millions watching worldwide. Humans had insisted on making this evaluation public, another decision that defied conventional diplomatic protocols. Distinguished representatives of Earth, ZYX began, their translator calibrated for maximum clarity. When I arrived 5 days ago, I thought I was here to evaluate a developing civilization. I was wrong. I was here to learn what civilization could become. A murmur ran through the assembly as the translator conveyed these words in hundreds of human languages. Your species consistently does what my analysis suggests is impossible. You take actions that our models predict should lead to failure, yet you succeed. You deliberately seek out challenges that we would avoid. You embrace chaos that we would flee. ZYX paused, their sensory tendrils extending to take in the room's atmosphere. Most remarkably, you transform disadvantages into strengths. Your biological fragility has driven you to develop extraordinary medical sciences. Your short lifespans have inspired you to create art that outlives its creators. Your emotional volatility has led you to depths of understanding that our logical stability never reaches. The ambassador activated a holographic display, showing Earth as seen from their ship. You live on a planet that regularly threatens your existence: earthquakes, volcanoes, storms, solar flares. Rather than leaving for safer worlds, you built civilizations in harmony with these dangers. You don't just survive chaos, you thrive in it. During my stay, I witnessed what you call sports, ritualized combat transformed into celebration. I experienced your entertainment, chaos harnessed for pleasure. I observed your crisis response, danger transformed into opportunity. In each case, you took what should be a weakness and forged it into a source of strength. ZYX's tentacles shifted color, displaying what in their species indicated profound respect. Your technology is not your most remarkable achievement. Your art is not your most significant creation. Your greatest accomplishment is your relationship with uncertainty itself. The assembly hall was silent now, every human focused on the alien diplomat's words. The Galactic Council has encountered many civilizations. Most follow predictable paths of development. They advance by minimizing risk, maximizing efficiency, and maintaining stability. You have done the opposite. You advance by taking risks, embracing inefficiency when it serves creativity, and turning instability into innovation. ZYX activated another holographic display, showing scenes from their stay: children playing, scientists working, artists creating, athletes competing. You are the first species we've encountered that doesn't try to overcome its contradictions, but instead harnesses them. You don't seek to eliminate chaos, but to dance with it. My final report to the Galactic Council will contain an unprecedented recommendation. Earth should not be evaluated by our standard metrics of technological advancement or social stability. You represent something new, a civilization that has found strength in what we would consider weakness, wisdom in what we would label foolishness, and progress in what we would see as chaos. The ambassador's tentacles shifted to a formal presentation pose. Therefore, I am recommending that the Galactic Council create a new classification specifically for Earth. You are not simply a developing civilization, you are a new type of civilization altogether, one that thrives on transformation rather than stability. Furthermore, ZYX continued, their translator struggling to convey the gravity of their words, I recommend that the Council initiate a reverse mentorship program. We have much to teach you about the cosmos, but you have even more to teach us about adaptation, innovation, and the courage to embrace the unknown. The assembly erupted in applause, another human custom that ZYX had come to appreciate despite its chaotic nature. As the sound washed over them, they transmitted their final report to the Galactic Council. Most esteemed Council members. My final conclusion may shock you, but the evidence is irrefutable. Humanity's apparent madness is actually a form of wisdom we have not yet evolved to understand. Their chaos is a kind of order we have not yet learned to perceive. They are not less advanced than us, they are differently advanced. While we pursued perfection through stability, they achieved resilience through adaptability. While we sought to eliminate uncertainty, they learned to harness it. Critical assessment: humanity represents not just a new civilization, but a new possibility, a path of development we never imagined possible. Their ability to thrive in chaos, to find strength in vulnerability, and to forge unity from diversity suggests that our understanding of civilizational development has been too narrow. Final recommendation: we must rethink our entire approach to interstellar diplomacy. The humans have shown us that there are forms of advancement we had not conceived of, paths to wisdom we had not imagined, and types of strength we had not recognized. Personal addendum: in my centuries of diplomatic service, I have never encountered a species that has forced me to question my own assumptions so thoroughly. The humans have a saying, the only constant is change. Perhaps it is time for the Galactic Council to embrace some change of our own. With profound respect and continuing bewilderment. Ambassador ZYX 427-inch. As ZYX prepared to board their ship for departure, Director Rivera approached with one final question: Ambassador, what surprised you most about humans? ZYX's tentacles rippled with what humans would recognize as amusement. That you surprised me at all. In preparing to understand your species, I had to abandon everything I thought I understood about understanding itself. And that, I believe, is humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy.